Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and we have got some SEC quarterback battle decisions rolling in all throughout the weekend. Now, it would be kind of pointless if I just came on here. I just told you what the decisions were. You can find those for yourself. What I wanted to do was kind of dive into a little bit more of what they mean, almost right, and where it shows us how the coaching staff is thinking. What they think of their team, what their philosophy is going to be this season. Because I think we can learn a lot more from really digging into the decisions rather than just saying them out loud. So starting off with the Alabama Crimson Tide, they announced this past weekend that they are going with Keelan Russell as starting quarterback. Now, let me get this out of the way first, right? Because Austin Mack, who he was battling with, he followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington to Tuscaloosa, put his faith in DeBoer as his head coach, and it seemed like this was kind of going to be his year now that Ty Simpson was gone. So it sucks for Austin Mack, right? It sucks for Austin Mack that he's not going to get to be QB1 for Alabama this year after seemingly, kind of hitching his wagon to DeBoer and having this year be his year. In theory, it's now going to Keelan Russell. But I think it's for good reason, right? And with Keelan, his disadvantage from Austin Mack, it was never really football related, it was experience related, right? It was just Austin Mack has had more time in the system. He knows what DeBoer wants to do, right? He's just more familiar. He's older, more experienced, and Keelan Russell was younger, not quite as polished, more raw. It quickly became a point where Austin Mack's experience wasn't his advantage, but it was what was just keeping him in the QB battle, if that makes sense, right? It wasn't what was separating him. It was what was keeping Keelan Russell from being immediately named the starter, because he is just a stick of dynamite. I mean, he has been hitting deep shots all summer long to guys like Darian Morgan, Ryan Coleman Williams. His legs were on full display at A-Day in the spring game, where granted he wasn't being hit, but you still saw that burst, that athleticism. And really what it shows me is that, DeBoer thinks that Keelan can be a program-changing guy. Because if he had started Austin Mack this year, even with Mack potentially leaving Alabama next year to go pro or whatever the situation would be, you still quadruple the risk of Russell leaving the program, right? Going through the portal because he didn't earn that starting nod. Giving Keelan the reins right now, it shows obviously that DeBoer thinks he's good enough to go to the playoff and win a championship with, because that's what he thinks of his team this year. It also just shows that he's the quarterback of the future there in Tuscaloosa. Right, Russell's going to be kind of headlining this youth movement on Bama's offense, and he seems like he's already ready. Right? Because I trust DeBoer, I trust Ryan Grubb, I trust Bama's staff to eval players appropriately. So, with that in mind, man, I mean, Russell, I think, is ready. You're still going to see him be a freshman, right? You're still going to see him be a young quarterback, but I don't think he's like every other young quarterback. I think his ceiling is incredibly high, and his floor is probably higher than most other true freshmen. I'm really excited for Keelan this year. And let's just go to the other freshman quarterback that was announced just this morning. We learned that Faison Brandon is going to be the starting quarterback for Tennessee Vols. Now, this one was a bit of a more unique battle in the sense of his competition, George McIntyre, was also a redshirt freshman. Right, so Faison's a true freshman, McIntyre's a redshirt freshman. They're both very young. It's not like Brandon, as a first-year player, had to beat out an upperclassman. He was beating out a guy who redshirted last season. So there wasn't quite that experience advantage like we had at some of these other battles around the conference. But Brandon, man, I mean, just through all of fall camp, it seems like he had the better day every day. Right, McIntyre was being talked about being consistent, right, making good throws. He still looked like a good quarterback, but it just wasn't the same level that it was with Faison Brandon. With his playmaking ability, with his size already at 6'4", 225, I believe is what he measures in as right now. He's already physically ready to be a quarterback in the SEC as a true freshman. I mean, Brandon's ceiling, it's up there with everyone in the entire country, truly, in terms of what he can do throughout his entire career. And what I'm really excited about, even though the discourse at times is probably going to get a little toxic, but with Brandon and Keelan Russell becoming starters in the same season, they're going to be compared to each other, right? They're going to be measuring sticks for one another throughout their entire playing careers. And with Tennessee and Bama being the rivalry that it is, I think you're going to get an even better quarterback rivalry just between these two guys. I'm incredibly excited about Brandon on Rocky Top. I think him and Keelan as a just as a head to head in the SEC is going to be incredible to watch for hopefully the next 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of young talent in the SEC, man, and especially at quarterback, and seeing these two guys get those jobs is going to be really exciting to watch this season. Let's go to a couple more, slightly more veteran guys. At Florida, it was announced just 20 minutes before I'm recording this that Aaron Philo won that job over Tramel Jones. Now, obviously, Tramel was kind of the heir apparent to DJ Lagway last year. He stuck it out. He did not transfer. But Aaron Philo came in with Buster Faulkner, who is the new offensive coordinator there for Florida from Georgia Tech. That familiarity immediately put him ahead of Tramel Jones. And after spring, the gap between Philo and Jones was big, right? And then when we got to the fall, it was smaller, right? Because Tramel had more time to learn the playbook. So that advantage for Philo kind of withered down. And then it simply became, who do you trust more to run this offense? Because for the Gators, you have so much skill talent at running back, at receiver, where the quarterback just kind of has to make the right decisions, right? There's not going to be that much pressure on the QB of Florida here to go be the star of the offense. They just need to be a key cog and not make mistakes. So with that lack of pressure being put on the quarterback, you can kind of go with a lower ceiling guy in Aaron Philo when you know you have that pretty high floor with the continuity. So that's why I think you really saw Philo get this job, was because you don't need a super high ceiling quarterback because of how much elite skill talent there is there on Florida's offense. So just Philo's continuity, his familiarity with the staff, it got him there. And for Tramel Jones, it's going to have to be, he's good enough to go play quarterback somewhere now. He will certainly be good enough to go play somewhere next year. So it'll be interesting to see if he is still in Gainesville come 2027. It'll be hard to blame him if he isn't because he has all that talent, right? We saw his ceiling a couple of times, his potential, I should say, a couple of times last year with the Gators. So it'll be interesting to see if he's still in Gainesville come next year. But for this season, you have Aaron Philo there for Florida, just providing that floor, providing that consistency, knowing that he is incredibly familiar with Faulkner's playbook. I'm sure that Tramel is there, right? I have full faith that Tramel Jones was learning it quickly, that he took big-time strides, but you just had the familiarity, that continuity, that sort of steady horse that you need for the Florida offense, and that is Aaron Philo. And then finally, KJ Jackson got the job at Arkansas over AJ Hill. KJ was behind Taylor Green last year in Fayetteville, and he was battling with AJ Hill, who was a former blue chip guy, transferred up from Memphis with Ryan Silverfield. So kind of the continuity worked the other way, right? Where normally the transfer quarterback is the one who's fighting to learn the new playbook, but at Florida and Arkansas, it's on the other way around, where the guy who was at Arkansas last year in KJ Jackson actually had, I guess, the structural disadvantage in the quarterback battle. But this one, I think, was kind of always the clearest answer, even though it took just about as long to make the decision. But just because KJ is a little more experienced, right? AJ Hill is so raw. He just hasn't quite done it a lot. KJ was able to learn behind Taylor Green, who plays pretty similar to him, right? Both KJ and AJ Hill are like freak athletes, right? They're super tall, they're super long, they're super fast. So there wasn't even necessarily the potential for an athletic gap or a familiarity gap, even though AJ had that, but just the familiarity that KJ has to college football, right? Not necessarily Silverfield's playbook, his team, his scheme, but just to the sport itself and what it takes to play at this level. That's what was giving KJ the job, right? And like I said, this one seemed like it was much less of a back and forth battle. It seemed like Jackson was kind of always just the guy. They were waiting for him to go take that job. And Arkansas's offense doesn't have a whole ton of great playmakers on it, right? I mean, Braylon Russell, Sutton Smith, they're running the ball, but at receiver, a lot of questions. So whichever quarterback had won this job, I didn't think was really going to be put into a great spot. That still does stand with KJ here. But AJ Hill, I'm excited to see develop. And I think that part of the reason, again, why KJ got this job is because if this Arkansas offense doesn't have that many great pieces, if it's going to be hard to thrive in it, you don't want to throw AJ Hill into the fire like that and, shake his confidence for the rest of his college career. Or get him beat up if he puts everything on his shoulders. I'm not saying that they're using KJ as a sacrificial lamb, but they trust him more to be able to handle the adversity that is, truthfully, likely coming Arkansas's way this year. So those are the four decisions that we have. We have Keelan Russell at Alabama, Aaron Philo at Florida, Faison Brand at Tennessee, and KJ Jackson at Arkansas. The last QB battle that has yet to be decided is Vanderbilt's. That's Jared Curtis, the 5-star true freshman, versus Blaise Berlowitz, who's been there. He was behind Diego Pavia. That one I expect will get pretty soon too, and I believe it will be Jared Curtis. Just because the biggest question with Jared was, can he acclimate himself to college football? Can he elevate his game to be where it needs to be at this level of the sport and not just being an elite high schooler anymore? And it seems like in Vandy's first scrimmage, he did just that, where he had his best practice yet. He obviously has a higher ceiling than Blaise Berlowitz. I think the floor is just about the same. But for Curtis, I think it'll be a learning year. I think we'll find out that Jared Curtis is the starter for Vanderbilt pretty soon here. So that'll do it for this episode, right? We had 4 quarterback battles, get answers, one that is yet to be answered officially, but I think we all know where that one is going. Season's right around the corner, guys. We got kickoff in 5 days with TCU in North Carolina in Ireland. SEC play starts next Thursday when Missouri hosts Arkansas Pine Bluff. It's here, man. We made it through the summer. It is here. College football is officially upon us. If you want daily college football content, subscribe to me here on YouTube. Follow me on podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Will Thomas CFB, Tailgate Talk SEC, everywhere else. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.